Jimi Wanjigi.
Asante sana. Good to see you, Drew.
Good to see you too.
How are you?
I am well, thank you.
You look well, all of you. I haven't seen you this year.
Is that intentional?
You've invited me now, so I've come. So I guess I wasn't welcome before.
Oh, stop it.
It's good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Yeah, how's the year treating you?
Well, you know how it is. Isn't it interesting how the greetings are always they've evolved into, just imagine that I am just managing and hobbling along.
That's terrible.
I know.
That's terrible.
It must be better, mustn't it?
That is not what you were brought to this world to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be.
You're brought to live.
And thrive. And there should be environments which are made conducive for thrivation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's God's word. We are supposed to make heaven right here on earth.
And if heaven is not
why are you laughing, CT?
No, Bishop, I wasn't laughing.
He's still in the throes of it. It's just Monday after all.
I was a good student.
Just a little heaven down here.
Why not? Okay. Well, that's great. And I guess that forms the basis for a lot of conversations that we will have this morning. Yes. And so we're happy that you're here again.
Thank you.
Look, always things to look into, and I think we must keep each other righteous, following in that tradition, of course. Keep each other righteous, keep each other accountable, and when we're looking for certain things towards how government should run, how the people of Kenya actually should thrive within the boundaries, then these conversations are extremely important.
Absolutely.
But before we get into them, CT, as you know, he's in a different African country this week. Tell us what the proverb is. You can interpret that for us.
Yes, we are in the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria. Yes. The proverb, the one whose belly is not full of straw is not afraid of fire.
Who's not full of straw?
Yes, he's not afraid of fire.
That's a good one. Yeah. So if you're not guilty, you're not, you don't fear.
Yeah, this man, there was an author in our youth called James Hadley Chase.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a book. The guilty are afraid.
Yes.
People read James Hadley Chase as though it was a Bible.
Correct.
Yes.
Huh?
So the guilty.
It's the guilty who are afraid.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, in conversations that we've had with you previously, Jimmy, we've looked at public debt, we've looked at odious debt, we've looked and said certain things like Kenyans don't owe anybody any money. The people who took the money are the ones who should pay. But Kenyans have a right to say, you know what? We're not paying this money and we should jolly on be able to move on with our life. That conversation has evolved over time, where people are a little bit more woke, if I can use the term, to say that, you know what, it is actually true that in this thing that we talk about thriving, that Kenyans should not be at the place whereby you can't squeeze a little bit out to then be able to survive. That it should not be for every 100 shillings that 70 of that goes towards paying debt and 30 goes towards doing everything else, and still expect that Kenyans then can thrive. So Kenyans get to a point where they can make demands of those who've been put in positions of authority over them to do the right thing. So now we look at Kenya's public debt again. We see, or we've heard from today's headlines, that the Auditor General, for the first time, I think in the next few months, will then make the state of Kenya's debt now public in terms of who owes what, in terms of what it was borrowed for, when it was borrowed, and how it has actually been used and absorbed. That is what we hear. Whether and when that will happen, we'll wait and see. June is not too far off. It's just 2 months away. Let's wait and see if that actually happens before we get into a new fiscal period. But now we are asking ourselves, with that public debt, with those things being set in place, and with political realignment and saying where are people going towards 2027, it would be interesting for us to know then, or to hear and start to have conversations then about how this debt and how the political economic situation in the country is affecting Kenyans and what we would want going into the future. From where you sit, start us off with that. And are we in a better place than we were?
Of course
90 days ago?
Of course not. And let us start with the former, which is our problem. What is our slavery? You've identified it. It's debt. We've been talking about debt for the last 3 years. And it's so good to wake up this morning to see those headlines as you started off with the show. It's so good to see those headlines. Somehow or other, people are actually now coming to appreciate that this is our problem. And it is very simple, right? Because this debt, right? And I can tell you here, and I've said it here for the last 3 years. You were the first ones to host me. I remember it was early December 2022, right? When you hosted me on this show. And I said, we have no debt in this country. We have illegal debt. And if we can just do a quick analysis, a simple analysis, I think we'll do it. And we can use the Nation. I think Nation headline had a nice script today, right? They said they started with Kibaki, handing over to Uhuru. But I want to go to Moi. And I want to put 2 columns. One is called debt, one is called revenue. Because that's very important that we understand it. So the debt that Moi handed over to Kibaki was 600 billion shillings. All right? 600 billion. Yes.
What did Mo inherit?
I can't give you those figures. They're very amorphous, but it was not much from Kenyatta. It wasn't much. I can tell you that.
And how much debt did Kenyatta inherit? Again, we're not certain.
No.
All right.
Because there are a lot of amorphous things. For example, they say that, we got a grant to buy land from Zungus.
To buy off the
Others
settlers.
say that they were still put in the books as a loan. The records are not as good as you can imagine. But I can tell you, the economic book of Kenyatta was not too bad. In terms of debt, it was not too bad. It wasn't.
But there was a debt.
There was a debt, but it was not much. Moi accumulated massive amounts of debt. And in contrast to revenue, his tax revenue collections, the maximum he had achieved was 170 billion.
Over what period?
A year.
Okay. 170 billion over a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Those were his maximum tax collections. Right? Kibaki, right, inherited that 600 billion. He handed over to Uhuru. I saw the Nation saying 1.9. I have a different figure, but let's just take their 1.9. Right? But Kibaki's revenue, when he was exiting, was 1 trillion shillings. So 1.9 trillion in debt and 1 trillion.
Wait, Kibaki, okay. Kibaki inherited 600 billion debt.
Yes.
Pushed it to 1.
And a revenue
And
of
revenue?
170 billion
Yes.
maximum.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, then
He handed over to Uhuru
yes.
a debt of 1.9 trillion
With
and a revenue of 1 trillion.
Debt and then, okay. Right.
Okay.
Okay? So if you look at just those two figures, you can see 170 billion, right?
Yes.
Debt was 3 times the revenue. Okay? With Kibaki, he reduced it, was just double.
Yes.
Okay? We are on the same page?
Yes.
CT, are we together?
And
Good.
increase the revenue.
Yes, it was revenue to debt.
Yeah.
It was just, debt was just double revenue.
But revenue was 3 times.
With Moi, it was 3 times.
Yeah.
All right. Then Uhuru hands over to Ruto, right? He hands over a debt of 8.7 trillion.
No, just go back a little bit. Tell us what Kibaki gave to Huru.
1.9.
And then 1
And he
trillion.
had revenue of 1 trillion.
Okay, super. Go on.
So look, from 170 billion to take it to 1 trillion in 10
Yes.
years. Phenomenal.
Yep.
So Uhuru hands over a debt of 8.7 trillion to Ruto.
Yes.
Okay? Why are you laughing?
Because it's doing a dizzy on me.
So he takes it from 1.9
Phenomenal.
to 8.7.
Right.
Okay? And he hands over a revenue of 2 trillion.
Okay.
Now, if you do the same ratios we are talking, this is now more than 3 times. The debt is more than 3 times the revenue. Okay? So even he exceeds Moi's record.
Yes.
Okay? All right? Are we on the same page?
We are.
Now, from 8.7, it has now gotten to 11.
11 trillion debt.
right? In 2 years.
Yes.
In 2
years.
Okay.
Not 10.
No, 2.
Yeah.
And the revenue has just gone to 2.4 trillion.
And these are numbers that are in the public arena. They're not hidden. It's
no.
It's not Jimmy
arena.
It's not
No,
Jimmy
I'm not cooking.
Not Jimmy cooking something in his basement.
I don't need to cook these. These are public. You can double check them.
Okay. So a question that would be attached to that, Jimmy, is that the assumption or the law states that you borrow for development. You don't borrow for, we got to take a trip to whatever. You borrow for development. Can we see the corresponding development projects to this money over the years from 600 billion? Because even in the times of the late retired Moy, the law was still that you borrow for development.
Okay, I fully agree with you. I think we've been through the law on that.
Yes, we have.
But I'd like to approach it just a bit different,
okay,
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'd like to just go to a column called payment of debt.
Payment of debt, okay.
All right. So that column, up until between 2013 and 2022, we paid 5.6 trillion towards the payment of debt.
In 9 years, you paid 5.6 trillion
to the payment of debt.
Okay.
So the year 2022 to 2023, we paid another 1.4.
1.4 we paid
trillion. 2023, 2024. 2024, 2023, 2024. 2022, what did I tell you earlier?
You said
2022 to 2023, we paid 1.4.
Yes.
2023 to 2024, we paid 1.6. And this current financial year, 2024, 2025, we are paying 1.9 trillion.
So why can't we see the number reducing?
Yeah.
No, just do. I think you're good at math, CT.
I'm terrible at math.
So 5.6
so there's this
plus 1.4 is 7, right?
There's this nifty thing called a calculator.
Yeah.
And
so 5.6 plus 1.4.
5.6 plus 1.4 plus 1.6 plus 1.7.
1.9.
1.9.
Yes. Is how much?
1.2 is 10.1.
10.1.
Yes.
No. It's not 10.1.
It must be more.
5.6 because if you add this 1.4, 1.6, 1.9,
it's 10.2.
10.2.
You've done the math.
10.2, yeah.
It's 10.2.
10.2 trillion.
Yes.
That is what you're adding the 5.6 to it.
Yes.
5.6?
No, me I'm getting 5. I'm getting 10.4. 10.5 actually.
Let me do it again.
1.4 plus 1.6 plus 1.9 plus 5.6.
It's 10.5.
Yes. 10.5 trillion.
Yes.
Okay, so that is what is recorded, right? This financial year, we have not completely finished the 1.9. But that is what is recorded for our debt payments. All right? Before we get into what it has been used for, whether it's been legal or not. So we have paid 10.5 trillion.
Yes.
Yet we still have an outstanding of 11.
Sorcery.
How does that make sense to anybody? Does it?
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Maybe a pertinent question here, because I want to look at the time period. It's important, Jimmy, that you talk of debt of 5.6 trillion being paid between the years 2013 and 2022.
Yes.
It was at that time that former President Uhuru Kenyatta was the president, obviously.
Yes. And even as he paid that,
at that time that the debt was at 8.7 trillion.
Correct.
So if 8.7 trillion shillings was the debt that he had amassed over 10 years, and he paid 5.6, essentially we're saying 5.6 was paid, then really the debt that he should have handed over to President William Ruto would have been 3.1 trillion.
Should have been.
Should have been.
And then maybe you minus the payments towards Kibaki's debt of 1.9.
So how can
it comes
we
down
say,
a bit more?
So how
you
can
understand
we say that government is paying debt,
right?
Is paying off these loans,
right?
And whatever they are saying they are still borrowing is still in the public arena, but we still have the same debt owed over these 20 years.
That is why I can't wait for the Auditor General's report. I don't know why they haven't called us, because we bothered to do a proper forensic audit on that debt. They should have called us. Would have handed over to them
Your numbers.
Our findings.
Yes.
But,
right? And I'm sure it would have hastened because we just taken it from their books. And we used a very bright man who has been, who headed the team called Bernard Mushere, who has worked as an internal auditor of government for 40 years.
So he knows.
He knows his stuff. Okay? He had a wonderful team, and in 2022, he came out with these numbers. And you see, that forensic audit was based on primarily this, that look at the numbers and compare it with the law, which is what Lou is asking. Was it taken for development?
And the numbers are in government books,
Yes.
and these are in the public domain.
In public domain.
Yes.
So there was this magic that the interest rate did on the Kenya shilling. isn't
Really?
it? So,
I mean, we can't understand it.
go with the girl now. So in January especially, so
Yes.
we came off of 2022 with some ridiculous numbers in terms of what the doozy that the dollar was doing on the Kenya shilling, and we're at 160 at some point. And so that meant that if you owed any money, that the interest shot up easily. If you borrow $1 million, you're paying the same in interest, essentially. So would this not have contributed to the amounts of money that was being paid? That's why your principal still remains the same if you're paying so much on interest?
Just call it voodoo economics. Because really, I mean, if you believe anything you're actually seeing from the Treasury today or from the central bank, I think you'll be scratching your head. Yes. You see, it's basically this. Yeah? What we have in public domain is contrary to what is actually done by the Treasury, so-called by the private company. All right? So in the year, for example, just to throw a figure, Ruto's first budget, okay? Because you asked a pertinent question about legal debt.
Right.
In Ruto's first budget, right, 2023, 2024 was his first budget, right? If you look at the books submitted, which are the budget books, because you must get approval of any borrowings through the budget, right? Foreign and external loans is the only column for borrowing in the revenue estimates, right? There were 313 billion. 13 billion. The following month, in what is called the statement of actuals and estimates, gazetted by the Treasury, all right? They put foreign loans at 700 billion, and they put domestic debt at 1 trillion. Yes. So where is that passed? Where is it passed? So this is in plain sight. You all see it every month. Why don't you question it? If you look at last month's figures, you'll ask the same questions. Where are these budget figures? Are we even operating a budget? What they passed was a supplementary budget. It's not a budget. Remember when the finance bill got thrown out?
Yes.
Yeah.
They literally cancelled the budget and they passed a supplementary budget. The supplementary budget is not a budget of Kenya.
It isn't.
It isn't.
2027 is another election where there will be, for all intents and purposes, a new government in place. Many would say knock on wood, but okay. Coming in from some of the things that we've seen so far, what does it have in terms of consequences on what could happen in the future? When we talk about not knowing where this money went for debt, not knowing some of these projects that should have been there for the betterment of the economy, the betterment of the people, and then saying, let's change things or do something to make them better. But essentially we're saying that the same people have been in these positions all this time. Can you have a turnaround with the same people who are stirring the pot?
Can't.
Can't?
No, that one, no. If you oversee the collapse of an institution, you cannot be the one who's going to oversee its resurrection.
Correct.
Out of the
We just say, go have a moment, a meeting with yourself.
You will not have the skills because if you did, you would have ensured that the collapse didn't take place
in the first place.
Yes.
So what's the silver lining then for Kenya when it comes to us handling our debt? Because then again, we can't just be hopeless.
Let me answer it by asking Jimi a question.
Yes.
Okay? Practical question. Jimi, the SGR, from what you told us yourself here, you knew about it because you were among the people who conceptualized it.
Yes.
The World Bank opposed it.
Yes.
Why was it opposed? What had you budgeted for it? And what were we later to hear when Uhuru and Ruto came into power was the budget of what was spent on the SGR? I'm going to answer that question with the answer Jimi will give you.
Yes.
It was very simply this. We conceptualized it as a private project, as a PPP. In other words, no taxpayers' money. All we were doing was extending what was called the meter gauge to standard gauge, keeping it on the ground from Mombasa all the way to Malaba as a private entity. Kenya Railways,
same railway.
Same railway.
Yes.
Kenya Railways were going to be shareholders because they owned the land.
The land.
All right? But we were going to build the rail, right?
Yes.
And we were going to buy wagons. Okay? In partnership with people in the private sector that wanted to run the rolling stock. That project was only 55 billion shillings from Mombasa to Malaba.
55
billion.
From Mombasa to Malaba.
Not Malaba, Naivasha,
Malaba. The border of Uganda, the proper Uganda today as we talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay? All right? So it was not fancy. It was not going up in the air, all these civil works. I don't know what to do. Apana. Okay?
The old railway line.
Old railway line. Just extending it like this. And no taxpayers' money, no debt. No debt. We were taking over what was a failed concession to RVR. Right? Revamping the line and running it.
That's it.
That's it. Now, what happened is that became a project between Mombasa and Naivasha in 2 contracts, a total of 500 billion shillings. All right? From 55 to 500 billion to Naivasha. All right? And the Chinese said they were going to give us a loan of 90%, which was 450 billion shillings. And Kenya government, as Kenyans, were to pay 50 billion shillings, right, as our 10% contribution. Now, we further did now an audit on top of that of what was actually done. So did we get the money from China, 450? Yes. We got it. There was a drawdown, certificates to China Exim Bank, 450.
But that's still
give and take.
But that's still money for Kenyans to pay back, though.
Yes, of course.
But you said there's no...
No. We got the money from China. It was a loan.
Okay.
Right? And a fairly expensive loan, I must say.
It was from the bank.
It was from China Exim Bank.
It wasn't a concessional...
No, it was very expensive. Exim Bank is a quasi-government bank. But this one was exceptionally expensive. All right? Now,
why was it?
The terms were as such. I guess maybe they did not see it as prudent, and it was a lot of money.
The terms did not favor us.
It was the biggest loan we had ever taken from China. Biggest.
Okay.
All right? Now, because at the time it was estimated at almost $5 billion. Right. That's the total, $5 billion. You know, exchange rates were different at the time. Then we audited the amount of money we contributed, the 10%, 50 billion shillings, towards the loan, towards the construction of SGR to Naivasha. Right? Simple audit. It's called self-raising finance. Grant from the Treasury to Kenya Railways to onward payment to China Road and Bridge. Simple math. All right? And this is, again, government records. It wasn't 50 billion. We paid a total from the Treasury of 644 billion.
Back to the bank?
No. Treasury was supposed to pay 50 billion to Kenya Railways.
Yes.
As a grant for onward transmission to China Road and Bridge.
Okay.
Directly.
Yes.
As our 10% contribution
towards the project.
The project.
Okay.
And it was done every drawdown. Every time they bring a certificate, we pay 10%, China pays, China Exim Bank pays 90%. All right? Every time they bring a certificate. So we just measured what did Treasury give Kenya Railways as the 10% contribution for that construction. It wasn't 50 billion. It was 644 billion.
Over time, or is just in
over time?
Over time, yes.
Over the time of the construction. All the time of the drawdown of any of the construction. So it's over time. So we paid for what was originally 55 billion as a private project, on contract is 500. In reality, we paid 1.1 trillion for the same project.
1.1 trillion.
Did that money?
All right. So
actually
you
go?
are saying, yes, it went.
Okay.
Okay. And we are paying back a loan of 450 billion. All right. We contributed more
Towards the
than
project.
the construction of that project.
Meaning we did not need to have borrowed in the first
No.
place.
No.
Because if that's what we paid, we could actually have built that railway on our own.
Yes.
Twice.
And twice.
Twice.
We'd have gone up to even maybe further than Naivasha.
And
Now-
yes, when we say railway, this cost included the locomotives.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The rolling stock.
Oh, that's what it's called. Huh?
Yes, it's called rolling stock.
Okay.
Now, when you look at it that way, right? When you look at it that way, you ask yourself, who in their right mind is going to borrow more money from China to extend this railway? Okay? Right now, it's not viable. We are paying from our pockets to sustain it. It's economically unviable. Where are you extending it to? Don't we have other priorities? People here are looking for food. Don't we have other priorities? How many people use that railway? Will ever use it? What goods are there? That's why you have a man who was this man who came from Vietnam the other day,
Oh, yeah.
right? Who tells us you build this expensive railway to take which goods? Where?
Where?
Yeah.
What goods is this you have? You don't even have the power for those goods
Yeah.
to manufacture those goods. Okay. And I mean, these are stark realities. Right? What foolishness is this? What drives us to do that? It's the mentality of extraction, exploitation.
Yeah.
Right? And here we are, believing we are big people. I mean, I saw Ruto say the most ridiculous thing in China. The most ridiculous. He stands up in front of a delegation of Chinese businessmen and women, and he says, China and Kenya are pivotal pillars in the new architecture of the world, of the financial world that is now coming under what is called the Fifth Order.
Well,
China and Kenya. I've never, I don't know, maybe in his mind, he's a big man.
think he's-
Okay? No, he thinks he's a big
So
man.
you didn't understand. You didn't understand.
What is it I didn't understand?
I also don't understand.
two of you don't understand.
Because city. You see, America and China, they say, and this was at the World Economic Forum the other day, China is about 21%, 22% of GDP of the world. America's 27% GDP of the world. So those two countries are 50%
Of the
Of the world.
of the world GDP. Right? Africa in totality, including North Africa, is 4%.
4%, yes.
And then we've tried Kabisa.
Which is just equivalent to the size of France contribution. One country. France's contribution to GDP of the world is equivalent to the whole of Africa.
Africa.
And we have 1.4 billion people here. So where is it? Kenya, what is Kenya in that? We are a speck. And just to go to power, I bothered to research some figures on power alone. All right? Just to give you power production. China produces 2 million megawatts of power. 2 million.
Million.
Pa?
2 million, the country. 2 million megawatts of power.
Every how long?
2 million.
City's asking per what?
No, per year.
There
Per
you
year.
go.
Annually.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's what
Per
I'm
year.
asking.
Annually.
2 million megawatts of power. All right? And they are now in renewable energy increasing new power at a rate of 300,000 megawatts of power per year.
And they run all
And they
their
are going-
industry and they have excess power.
And they, because of smog and all those things, they are now moving from that and creating renewable energy, right? At 300,000 megawatts per year is their target.
so that
So now, no. Kenya is where?
We are at 357.
No. We are 3,400 megawatts of installed power. What actually goes for our use is only 2,200. Right? Do you see the scale?
No, there's no comparison.
Can you compare?
There's no comparison.
So where is this we are discussing?
It's a stratospheric difference.
Anything
and so that brings me back to the other point that I was
so
making.
So please tell me, what is it I don't understand? All right? Even South Africa here, right, does 50,000 megawatts of installed power.
Yet they're in the dark.
Yeah.
And there's load
shedding.
You
have Egypt is 60,000 installed power. Nigeria is the one who has 30 installed power, but you have...
Please, let's not play a beg.
Something like 50 in gensets. Okay?
Yeah, just please, let's focus, okay? Jimmy.
But no. But just imagine, even around us here, on this continent, okay? We are like this.
And this is what I was saying.
Where is it we become giants?
So, Jimmy, I have to bring you back. The only way to become a giant, if we look at the same Chinese example that we are talking about, the only way to become a giant is when you're producing. The examples that you've given now were still hinged on production. That China is producing so much more power than it could use in decades. That it's producing much more. It's producing for its industry and it has excess that it can actually then now sell to neighboring countries.
No, they don't even want to sell.
And they don't even want to.
They don't want to sell.
Because it's not for sale.
It's not for sale.
My point being, the only way towards economic viability is when you're operating in surplus.
Yes.
The only way to then begin to operate in surplus is if you're making a finished product. Not this thing we are doing of saying, take your tea and give it to who, and then they do the value add and then sell it back to you.
So when Uhuru took power from Kibaki, industry, which is where you're talking about value add, was 14% of our gross national product. Of all that we produce, industry was 14%. All right? When he left power, it was 7%. Right now, it's going towards 6%.
Okay.
So what are you talking about?
So what I'm asking is...
And you're going to see the Treasury come and tell you now they want to tax imported goods. They are not talking about you. They want local manufacturing. Which local manufacturing? It isn't.
So who do you trust?
So we are an importing country.
Yeah.
So that cost will still come to us and they're going to cheat us. We're not touching you. They're touching us. They're touching us. We've become the dumping ground of the world for trade. We're just commodities place here that we just buy from others. This is a tragedy. Okay?
You see, the Vietnam CEO that you talk about, Don Chow, said, in terms of even investors coming to the country, there is no investor in their right mind who will come invest in a country where light is fidgeting and is not consistent. You talk about China producing surplus.
No, I didn't say it has surplus. I said it has 2 million. It's not surplus to them.
Okay, it has whatever it is they have. We do not have even enough to power our own homes.
Yes.
We talk about SGR and its all purpose, which is supposed to be getting goods out of the country. But one would have thought that even at the point of installation of SGR, EPZs and empowering farmers so that we are able to get products out of the country is something that one should have thought of, yet that was never thought of. But we have the SGR now. So moving forward, what must we do for this SGR to work for us is the question.
No, it can't. You see what happens. I think you're going too far. You see, I said we have a public entity that is actually a private company called Government of Kenya. All right? It's government extraction and exploitation. Why would it promote you? It comes to take from you.
You're not regarded.
You're not regarded. It's coming to take from you, to eat you.
How do we change that?
That's the point. You have to go to the original sin, which is you must remove this extraction company and its entire entity, what it stands for, how it operates. What you see as Government of Kenya today must stop. Its players must be removed. And the biggest way you start, right, is why we have been on the debt issue. You cut off this debt, I want you to imagine a very different life. You cut off our payment this year of 1.9 trillion in debt. What does it take to fund the health sector? Universal health care as a target was costed at 168 billion shillings. We are paying 1.9 trillion to debt this year.
It's a tenth.
We are paying 2.2 next year. We are paying 2.5 the following year. And I can go on with those figures, appreciating up until 2038, contrary to what our friend Bandi was saying, 2034. Okay? Now, we have a situation here where if you remove that debt, can we afford universal health care for everybody?
10 times over.
Right. To fund pre-primary education. Right? CT, you're good at math.
You know, you keep insisting. Go on.
No, even you are correcting, do you?
Please go on.
Right?
Yes.
You have 10 million kids, right? In primary school. They currently get 1,400, but even give them 4,000 shillings, right? Per kid. That is how many billion?
How many?
10 million times 4,000. I think that's 40 billion?
40
Yes,
billion.
40 billion.
Yes.
Then you have 4 million that go to high school. They say they should get at least 22,000.
It should be 22,000 in the books.
They get 17.
They get 17,
right now.
yes.
But 22 times is what? 80 something?
88.
80? 88.
Yes.
88. Now you have 275, let's say 300,000 in university. You see how people are cut off. It's tragic.
Terrible.
Yes.
You have 300,000 in university. They normally say that if you look at the average programs, they cost 300,000 shillings per year. So just take that a government's contribution can only be a maximum of a third. That's the place now a parent would contribute maybe 100,000 a year, and you could get a loan for 100,000. All right? So 100,000 times 300,000 is how much?
30 billion. 3 billion.
No.
100,000 times?
300,000.
It's 300 billion.
300 billion.
300 billion.
No, it must be more than that.
No.
Must be.
Are
you doing your calculation?
Yes, I'm just asking.
You're just guessing.
No,
300,000
yes.
times 100,000.
That's 3 trillion.
No. 30 billion, I think.
30 billion.
Do the maths.
It's 30 billion.
30 billion.
Yes, it is.
I thought you were better at
A
math.
billion is 9 zeros.
Yes, so
Yes.
now add 1 0 because and then it
30
comes
billion.
30 billion.
It's 30 billion.
It's 30 billion.
3 trillion sounds better.
You like 3 trillion? Okay, it's 30
30.
billion. Yes, it is.
Are you paying for SGR?
Just hold on. You're saying 300,000 times 100,000. Yeah, 30 billion.
30
yes,
billion.
it is 30
So 30 billion plus what is it in high school?
88.
88.
And what is it in primary? 40.
40.
How much is that?
70 plus 88 is 158 billion.
So 158
Yeah.
billion is all you need for no kid to pay any school fees until university. Right? You can probably even build schools and
For
absorb.
those that are in school currently.
Those are in school currently.
Yes. For
You
those
can
that are in
probably
school
build
currently.
schools so that you don't have 6 million that go out. Or build vocation schools because we need a lot of vocational training here. All right? Now, you are paying 1.9 trillion. So you can, this year, so with 400 billion roughly, 300 billion, 400 billion, you can easily take care of free primary, free high school, and a contribution in
University.
You can take care of universal healthcare in totality. Nobody would have to contribute a cent to shine shift. All right? And you still have change left. So where is your emancipation?
So essentially, if you're asking the question and we're answering,
what else do you need to know?
Your
We don't have-
emancipation is then being freed from the shackles of debt.
Correct.
Now, in order for that to happen, Jimmy, that there is a role that government plays, and this is the role that it plays, whether they are the agents of economic development, agents of infrastructure development, agents, etc., etc. And if we say then that they're the vanguards of debt and its payment, that there are certain people who are very aware of what is happening. So do I hear you to be saying that in order to be free of these shackles, and then we start now that money starting to work for Kenyans, that nobody who is involved in the current system should have any business being in the system if you want to be free?
Absolutely. If we have not understood this subject, then all we are doing is perpetuating our own economic demise, our own economic injustice. And if you look at those who have, you're the ones who should tell me what they represent. I don't know who are the candidates. Maybe you should tell me what they represent.
To start off with, the education budget per year is around 600
600 billion, yes.
Why is it 600?
Well, I'm answering the question that was asked earlier on with the 158 and what it can do. So if 158 can do what it said, this is billion Kenyan shillings,
Yes.
and you have 600 billion every year.
Yes.
Even if you take in the payment for teachers, for lecturers, for whom?
No, that is inclusive. That's what we are saying.
I'm being generous.
Yes.
Even if you threw that on top of the 158 billion, you still don't get to 600 billion.
Yes.
Which means, as currently stated, that budget that we have ought to be able to provide the education that we keep talking about.
And we ask, why is education in the ministry? It's a devolved function. Why is it in the ministry?
As opposed to in the counties.
Yes.
Well,
Why do they have such a huge budget? What nonsense is this? It's because it's a company. It doesn't want to let go.
You would assume that over time, when you start off with, you have a high budget because there are things you need to do, isn't it? But over the years, you should have done them, so certain costs should be eliminated.
Are you seeing a lot of capital expenditure with schools?
No.
Then,
If
what
that
is
was
it doing?
if that was the case, then we wouldn't have all this
6 million.
proliferation, first of all, of private schools.
Yes.
Schools, yes.
And the 6 million that
Yes.
are cut off
Yes.
after primary.
No, we would not see it.
You'd not see it. It will be absorbed. One of the biggest challenges is infrastructure. So people have failed because there are no classes to go to.
So what you're saying, Jimmy, is
So
that
this is education. Remember, for us to be great, we need to sort out education.
Yes.
I've not even come to curriculum.
I want us to take a break, and then we're going to look into then how do you bring in new governments, and we're talking about the road to 2027. How do you bring in new people? Oh, just by the way, just in case you thought you were out of the water, the president has just come back from, or maybe he's on his way back from China, where more development loans have been agreed upon. Yes, come back with a kitty. And I don't think the Chinese are saying, well, Happy New Year, Kenya, here's some money, you don't have to pay it back. I don't think that's the case. More money coming in to the tune of more hundreds of billions.
The Chinese issued a statement that they're giving us loans.
Well, the basket of goodies that the president said that
No, he
certain
can say
development
anything. He said the
agencies
same
said
thing.
they were bringing money in.
He said the same thing the last time he was in China.
I'm
He's
very
had 2
excited.
trips.
I'm very excited. There's a poultry project that's going to come up in Kajiado to the tune of 3.6 billion shillings. One development partner has said that they'll give that money.
I hope president goes to go and bring us 3.6 billion from another country.
For chicken.
Hoorah for chickens.
So how are we going to be able to break free and get to the point whereby economic development, at least the beginnings of it, is starting to be achieved? And then on the road, we're on the road, whether you want to admit it or not, Jimmy, we're on the road to 2027. Folks are already campaigning. Everybody's already saying who and their uncle is running for president. We're already hearing this. And then we're asking the question, so how are we going to get to the solution? And we're saying drain the swamp, essentially. Anybody who's touched or is even in the room, was a fly on the wall when these conversations were being had, has no business being in the new government.
They will not change anything.
Before Jimmy answers that, let me answer the question that was asked. The Chinese have said
Yes.
they are reviewing the MOU on the issues of our loans.
It is reported.
Yes.
Continue. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it is reported that is what they're saying.
Yeah.
They'll get back to us in 2 weeks. So the Chinese have not actually issued.
Okay, this state visit.
Yes.
So do what you are talking about are so-called the private investors who are saying, who he talked to, who are saying they're coming to invest.
Yes.
Like that chicken farm you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now,
Poultry farm sounds a little bit nicer.
Poultry farm. It sounds a bit more professional. Now, I want you to understand the tragedy, right? And what I'm talking about, extraction and exploitation. So China is a huge market for eggs. They eat 300 million eggs per day.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
300
Million eggs
per day. Now, instead of the government using that information to come and encourage Kenyans
to set up
with that information and make sure, right? Because I can assure you 3.6 billion shillings, if interest rates were not as high as they were, us here we could form a company and go and borrow at 5%.
Yes, now.
Right?
Yes.
And do that and try and find a way of our poultry farm being the supplier of that 300 million. If we can do it. It's very difficult to get those numbers out of Kenya, but you can start trying.
But you can start somewhere.
Right? Is anybody telling you that?
No, please.
No, the same company is telling you, let foreigners come and do it. Because they don't want to see you.
And you give them the land.
You don't want to see you be the one who does it.
So
because then you're in competition with them.
So explain slowly. So essentially what we are saying here, Jimmy, is you have a conversation with these foreign investors, because there were several foreign investment meetings that the president had in that state visit. So you have a conversation, because I think the name was given, I need to find that, but the name was given as to who would invest this 3.6 billion. So they come here, they set up a poultry farm. Everything having to do with the bird leaves Kenya. So of very little value then is that to Kenya, safer maybe if you give, people around the area a job or two or things like that. But the majority of this investment, the profits of it, leave the country.
Yes, exactly, because it's the investment. Where have you had an investment conference where the Kenya government is encouraging farmers to do poultry farming to export to China? Right? Because empowering you means that you become the competition to this private company called Government of Kenya, extraction company. That's the way you need to understand it.
That conversation, Jimmy, started and ended with the business parks that were talked about.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes. It started there and it ended there, because the theory was the very thing we're saying would have been done within the environment of those business entities.
Yes.
But do they even exist?
No.
Yeah, so.
10 years ago, 2024, there was 2014.
Yes.
A year after Uhuru got to power. There was a very big template that was created by the Ministry of Energy, about 5,000 megawatts. Do you remember that?
Yes, there was a lot of hoo-ha about it.
A lot of hoo-ha about private investment in power plants. They went for bidding for 2,000 megawatts. Right? And the view, if you remember, was they were saying they are going to cut the cost from 18 US cents to 9 US cents. Right? Per kilowatt hour. Right? So 2,000 megawatts were going to be added to the grid. As an initial start, they were going to start with fossil fuels, coal and LNG, right? And build up to 5,000 so that we have what you call some stability, right? And as we push the renewable energy. Okay? Those projects never took off. They were actually cancelled. And I want you to understand the principle of it. The government of Kenya was not giving a guarantee. I know this intimately. All they were doing was giving a power purchase agreement. All right? Full stop. And they were giving land in Dongo Kundu and Lamu for the construction. People were bringing in private money. All right? Today, I've done the numbers in terms of what was estimated. Today, you'd be charging electricity at 4 US cents. People would not even care about their electricity bill. It would be like maybe the water bill, even less. Okay? We are now being charged 36 US cents from the 18. So why didn't they take off? Why were they cancelled? And they had bids.
Why?
Because then you're in competition with this private company. That's the thing you need to understand. Right? That's the thing you need to understand.
So the private company needs to go.
It needs to go.
And when we are talking
get out
about,
of the way, right? So that it's the same one that today has gobbled up 6 trillion in domestic debt. 6 trillion of the 11 is domestic debt.
6 trillion owed to
Kenyans.
Yes. To Kenyan institutions.
Yes.
And Kenyans.
Yes.
In other words. Because if it's a bank,
it's
it's
the
your
banks,
money, it's the bank.
It's the banks, insurance companies, pension funds.
Or
our
if you
money.
gave your money towards T-bills, for example.
Yes,
6
Essentially,
trillion.
what we are talking about is if you give your money towards T-bills,
Yes.
and if we hear from the CS, essentially, that we're in a little bit of trouble when it comes to domestic debt.
Correct.
That means that your investment on your T-bill for the period will not come.
Correct. It sunk. What did they do with it? They didn't build a bridge. It's not in our laws that they are taking it for any development. It's not even in our laws that they're taking it to pay any salary. It's not in the budget as an expenditure item. It's not there as an expenditure item. So they've taken 6 trillion from us. If that was with us, you would all have your own media. You'd all be media moguls on your own because you'd be borrowing at 2%. So here's the company that took all our money to itself, away from us. And it started in 2013, 2014. Before that, domestic debt was peanuts.
Oh, guy. So, sorry, Jimi.
So you need to understand, this company is just taking from us. And now when it can't pay its bills, it's coming and taking taxes. Yeah, extracting, and giving us nothing in return.
Does this
I want you to understand something very basic, and this is where you must start asking questions, even UCT. Today, we have calculated that if you're earning a salary, all right, like you are paying indirect taxes of about 40%, and indirect of another 18%. So 68% of your income is going towards taxation. What are you getting back for it? If you don't start asking yourself that question, right, then you are not solving any problem for yourself. So you are asking emancipation, why are we stupid? Why don't we do things? Yes, here you are. You are. You are paying 68% to government. That is 70%.
Please break down that 68% again. I need to understand
So,
it.
depending on your basic income bracket,
Yes.
you're operating direct taxes between 35 to 40%.
40.
All right?
That pay as you earn,
Yeah,
NSSF,
everything.
shift, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And we'll call those taxation because at the end of the day, that's what they're becoming.
Yes.
All right? Then you have another 18% of indirect taxes. Every time you pay a power bill, you're paying VAT, you're paying various charges. Anytime you pay for fuel for a car or matatu or whatever, you're still paying all those charges. You must remember that about 53% of the pump price is taxation. All right? So you go on, you buy goods, you do this. It's roughly about 18%. Right? So that is 68%. Okay? Of your money going to government in taxation. Now, what do they give you in return? The same France, which you are saying has the GDP of Africa, right, is known as one of the highest taxed countries in Europe.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
60% is the average taxation, both direct and indirect. Right? But what do you get in return? You get infrastructure, you get security, you get free medical care, free education.
Low cost of living.
Low cost, well, they don't think
Relative.
so.
Well,
they don't think
think
relative,
so,
yeah.
but it's relative.
You get unemployment insurance. If you don't have a job,
Somebody's paying you.
somebody's paying you. And you get an amazing pension. So the fight in France is early retirement because you want that pension so you can go and live in the beach.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that good. Right? Get away from their winter. Okay? 60%. So here, what do you get? Do you get free healthcare?
No.
Do you get free education?
Healthcare doesn't exist.
No, okay, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We
Okay,
get
do you-
capitation not paid on time.
paid on
Not
time.
paid on time.
Yes.
Higher. No, but it's not free.
No, it's not free.
Everyone will still tell you
Yes.
there's still other charges.
Yeah.
Higher. Do you get good security?
Where?
Do you get infrastructure? Right. Do you get unemployment insurance? Right. Even pensions, which are a fast charge, are now being defaulted.
So then we can talk about these things, Jimmy, and like we got to connect it to the road that we are currently on, whereby there's so many things happening and folks are asking questions about the Constitution and the rule of law. There's an IEBC that's being put in place, hopefully that'll come into some kind of, commission at some point, and then we will have an election in 2027. But folks are putting themselves up and saying, allow me to lead. But from what we are saying, 75% of the people who are saying put me up for that position are the ones who are swimming in this swamp.
Correct. I fully agree with you. Yeah. And in fact, what you should do is just ask, because, I've been thinking aloud, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but we can point at what they say are the issues, right? So my friend Martha will say, for example, governance is the problem. My friend Kalonzo says corruption.
Corruption, yes.
My friend Regade, I think he talks about Mulima. I don't know how Mulima is the problem or is the problem. Then you have, who else?
He said Ruto is the problem.
No, Ruto says judge me in the elections by my results. So I think the judgment is already out.
Regardless says Ruto is the problem.
Yeah, fine. And Ruto says judge me. I think everybody says who is opposite Ruto is saying Ruto is a problem.
Right.
In
Yes.
terms of Ruto must go. But that's not the basic problem. It's just a symptom,
Okay.
right? It's not the original sin, which is what we're now trying to articulate. What is the original sin? He's just but a symptom. And anybody else can feel that. So Ruto says, judge me by my results. I think the jury has already ruled on that.
Okay.
Okay? He has nothing to show anybody. So he's done. Okay? Ruto is done. So judge people by what they are saying. I am saying we have a moment in our history. And if there's anybody who has any doubt, it was brought out by Gen Z last year. They came out and they broke all the barriers. And they said, this thing is not working for us anymore. Taxation without return, economic justice must come one way or another. My friend Omtata talks about accountability. Right? I think Maraga talks about the rule of law.
Rule of law, yes.
Are those the issues? Kenyans will judge. Okay? I am clear. This is about economic justice. This is about our economic emancipation. Once and for all, something that has eluded us for the last 120 years. All right? This is the time we break the shackles of what is holding us. And the way we start is by doing two things. By draining the swamp, by removing this system that is a company. And number two, cutting its umbilical cord to us, which is debt. You cut that thing today, right? And you see a very different Kenya. A very positive Kenya. A country that is headed to greatness. Because that's really our capacity. And you unleash a potential nobody has ever seen from this sub-Saharan continent. An amazing potential of our human resource.
And do we have the folks, do we have the people here to then be able to deliver that baby?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are here, even here, seated here. Yes.
Do I hear to be
3 of us here, 4 of us here. Don't we think that way? Yes.
Me, not entirely. Let me ask, for clarity's sake, do I hear you to be saying that given what the company that you refer to has done, and given where Kenya is as of now, that Kenya is actually a rich country?
Very.
That despite the ravages, the exploitation, it is still standing. It tells you that it is resourceful, it is resourced, but all those resources, or the vast majority of it, is going into the hands of this particular company.
Yes.
Does this company recruit new members?
Yes.
That's what our electoral cycles do.
Yes.
It's a recruiting process.
It's a recruiting process.
For new members.
For new board of directors.
And what about the ones who were there before? Do they ever really go anywhere?
No, they try and keep themselves there. And they keep surrogates. Just the way the owner was keeping them as surrogates.
So it is the same model is what they use.
Absolutely.
You see, City, one would say, as we get into the elections, the most important aspect of it all is to drain the swamp. Fine, we drain the swamp. But then again, for those who have continued to champion this ideology of stealing from the people, as well, action must be taken. Perhaps it's about time that heads started rolling and people went in jail. I mean, South Korea is doing it. Many other countries are doing it. Should that be the direction you take as well?
I think that is our law. If you've broken the law, you should face justice. There's no doubt about it.
For some weird reason, that doesn't seem to happen.
There's no doubt about it. But did the Mzungu face justice? Were we not told to forgive and forget?
Yes.
Or forgive and don't forget?
So
where did it begin? Right.
You know, the good thing about the colonialist is that he has given us an eternal excuse for literally everything.
We're just carrying on the same template.
And for some reason, despite evidence that we do have a complement of people who can likely take this country to the greatness it deserves, when we, the electorate now, come to vote, for some really odd reason, the people we always choose to elect are not necessarily the people who will do good by us. Start with our MCAs, go to our MPs,
governors.
Keep going up.
Yes.
Keep going up. Because the track record, which is perhaps manifested best with the current parliament, is that they will do anything and everything other than what is in the interest of those who elected them.
Now, CT, I see why you're saying you're skeptical. I have a lot of hope. And it even came about in the last election. In the last election, you had two camps that formed themselves. Right? It's the first election I've seen people being like us being stopped since multipartism. They actually went out to make sure there are two camps and they stopped literally everybody. It was shocking.
No, we saw
but
it. We saw it because we saw people being eliminated in that process.
Yes,
for
and
no
it's never
apparent
happened
reason.
before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never happened before. But where was the largest voter? Stayed at home.
Stayed at home.
8 million stayed at home. They did not believe there was a choice. That 8 million, you've seen it transfer to what you saw last year with the Gen Z revolution. If you are to look at those two camps that got 7 million, where do you think a lot of that flock is right now? I don't believe they're with the same flock, with the same people.
Some have
So you're
fallen
going to
along
find
the
this
way.
8 million has grown, even just out of the figures of 2022, to a phenomenal number that are looking for a different way than the way that was structured in 2022. And a lot of these people you're seeing today were in either one of those camps. All right? I did not vote. I was one of those that stayed at home. Okay? I can assure you, with new voter registration, with that 8 million, plus the ones that are already disenchanted, whether in UDA or Azimio, I can assure you that 8 million is a very huge group. And that is where change comes. And it's a very informed group.
In fact,
and they want to change this game. They don't want those old politics. The legacy politicians, the legacy games, they are not interested. They want a new order, right? They want to know what they're actually getting from a government, what they're getting for existing. And I'll tell you, I've taken the time to try and understand some of these young kids, right? I've been paying some attention to them, listening to them. And I asked at one point, not too long ago, what puts you guys together? You're the young voter that is going to be 65% of the election, 65 minimum. What has put you together? And one young lady who was in university stood up and said, and asked a group, we were quite a number, asked them, how many of you went to boarding school at age 6? And they all put up their hands, but one lady who said that she went at when she was 9 years old.
Okay.
So they went to primary school, boarding. They went to high school, boarding. So she asked, who brought us up? Our teachers and fellow students. Did you like your teachers? Everybody said no. The most was, we liked one teacher, at best. All right. Did you have hardship? Yes. This lady even showed her hand. I even tried to commit suicide. She's now in the university. Who saved you? My fellow students. Did you know class? No. Did you know religion? No. Did you know tribe? No. You knew hardship and camaraderie. And somebody else stood up and asked and said, and then after all this hardship, where we have been expelled by our parents, literally thrown out, we are told the light will come when we have finished school. And when we come out of 10 of us, only 3 are getting jobs. So this is all a con. Okay? After all this hardship, it's all a con. Now, that is a group you're saying, CT, are going to go back to what? This
To
is
bring
a
the
group
same individuals back.
that was enlightened in education by one man called Mwai Kibaki, who knew that our greatness must come out of one aspect called education. Remember I told you the 3 pillars? He was the first one that used to start talking about Jivunie kuwa Mkenyan, trying to identify our cultural revolution. And during his time, we had the least imports of food. Do you know that? Even fish. He had created a ministry of fisheries so we could diversify our diet and create constituencies where there's ponds and fish and everywhere. All right? Then you have a minister under Uhuru who says we are going to import from the Chinese fish. Now, you see the difference.
Kibaki even provided a stimulus fund for those things.
For those things. Yes. So you had a government that understood for us to be great, those pillars must be in place.
Jimi,
right?
Yes, Jimi, I agree with you.
Now, you're trying to tell me that we can't get there? I'm sorry.
No.
We were already there.
Jimi.
Somebody hijacked. People hijacked. Just hold on. People hijacked, right? The revolution to our economic greatness. They hijacked it.
Not they hijacked it. They've continued to hijack it.
Correct.
Yes.
Now, we must claw it back. We must get it. We must ensure in the next election cycle, we get it.
Jimi, my problem is a simple one. The corrupting influence of power and the Kenyan way of acquiring wealth. We seem to believe that politics is a business.
That's why the company.
Yes.
Yes.
I am not convinced that this group we speak of has not been tainted by this thinking of ours. I am not convinced.
Which group?
These 8 million plus and growing and yet to join this, that they even tell. I am not convinced.
Now,
because the narrative I hear is the narrative I've heard for the longest time of people who are not in power. Then they get into power
and things change.
And then you wonder, what on earth is all this about?
The point I'm trying to make is exactly that. When you get to power, you're joining the private company. Right? And you become part and parcel of its enterprise. You know, there was a time people used to say, if you're rich outside, if you have money outside, you have got to get political power to protect your wealth because the government will eventually come and harass you. Okay?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you want to get rich, you have to go in the government to become rich. Okay? That is why I'm calling it a company. Once you change its basic formation, its original sin, it no longer becomes a profitable venture. Government service becomes purely service. So what you do is you take away its instruments of money. Do you understand? You take away.
And you destabilize its power.
You destabilize its power. And there are very few people who are prepared to do that. But that's how you uproot it. So you destabilize it this way, CT. All right? You change the economic model. It's now about supply-side economics, not demand, which is government-driven. It is private sector-driven. What Reagan did after Carter. That's where you saw the growth of Apple.
Absolutely. Yes. And many more private
and Silicon Valley. Yeah. All right? So you change the template. It is no longer government being the driver. Okay. You make sure. I told you if we are saving 1.9 trillion, government will stick to its core basis. Why does it then need to collect tax to that extent? Unless it's revolutionizing. You can literally say VAT, we're going to make it 5%. Right? So instead of 400 billion, you collect less.
Yes.
Right? And you still stimulate.
Private enterprise
you can even become the Exim.
No, it is not.
You can even create an Exim Bank of Kenya. Right? And loan our neighbors and make sure that it's our contractors doing that work. But you remove, right, government of Kenya as a company. Why is it still supplying power? Why? Why is it taking our domestic money from our banks?
And this is the thing,
out.
Jimmy.
Once you remove it, right, the private sector will be where you go and make money, not the government. And that's the point.
I disagree.
Well, maybe that's a good point to disagree on. And our time.
Why do you disagree?
I wish CT would have disagreed a little bit earlier. Then we would have been able to have an opportunity to get into that.
I tried.
But our time actually has come to an end. And, you know, that we get into these conversations, I think it's vital for us to have that. And that reality then dawns on us. And Jimmy, we have to thank you for being here this morning and opening eyes to such realities and start to have different conversations. Perhaps that disagreement can come in a further conversation that we will definitely have with Jimmy in the future. Yes? Say yes.
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 Very good. Thank you so much, Jimi, for
Thank
being
you
here
very
this
much.
morning. Asante
I
sana.
appreciate it.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.